All right. How are we all tonight? Well, let's see. We are doing the rest of the UN report tonight. Hetman will be joining us shortly after he finishes reinstalling Discord again. So that gives us a few hot minutes here. I wonder. I not had a great day. So I woke up and apparently somebody was faking having cancer on Twitter. That's a thing that I don't really want anything to do with. Also, notice that we have new buttons. There is a join button on the stream now for memberships. Memberships cost 99 cents. Come with a variety of delightful preloaded YouTube badges and other things. And we have option for super chats. All of which if you wish to avail yourself of, you may. I will react in a favorable parasocial manner. So I looked at the last time we did this 3 weeks ago. I really shouldn't have let this go so long. And we left off at paragraph 96, I think. I'm going to redo paragraph 96 and go on from there. Just as soon as Hetman finishes reinstalling Discord. Literally the only person I know has this problem. Everybody else uses Discord all the time. This is why you do technical checks before showtime. Particularly when you're the one who set the show. What did you do to Discord? I have no idea. I have a feeling that his laptop is old and it has all of the problems that go with an old laptop. But you know, Batman manages to make computer issues that are baffling even to me. The other half of it is he's gonna have to remember what his damn password is. All right. Got it right. Let's pick up. We're talking about an attack on the rest area. The specific rest area that I will reiterate in a hot second. Public shelters. Survivors recounted feeling terrified, losing sense of time, and hoping for a swift end. In a recording from one of the shelters, people are heard shouting, "They are killing us," and "Grenade," followed by screams. In both the Alumum and Western Ream shelters, survivors stated that the ordeal provoked thoughts of the Holocaust. A survivor from Alumum said, "Now I know what it was like in the Holocaust, how it was with the Jews." While a survivor from Ream told the commission, "I was sure they were going to take me out and shoot us all in a row like the Holocaust. I told myself, it'll be okay, it'll be quick, I'll be dead soon." The ordeal was especially hard for those who survived by hiding under bodies, as they did not know whether the militants would return and win or if they would be rescued. One survivor from Eastern Rahim Shelter said, "It was an ordeal. We prayed to die. No one wanted to remain alive in that place. We just wanted it to end quickly." Commission observes that the methods of killing across the shelters were similar. A group of militants arrives and circles the shelters, attacks with grenades, and then proceeds to indiscriminate shooting into the shelter, as well as shooting any persons who try to escape. patterns suggest the militants had tactical plans for the situation and standing operational instructions or procedures. The Illum incident appears to have been a shorter overall. There we go. Hetman, can you hear me? Hello? Hello?
Hear me now?
Nope, your microphone's far away.
It is actually very close. Hold on.
Sounds like you're speaking through a fish tank 3 rooms away. Try jiggling the switch. It's leftist audio, folks. Bear with us. All right. While he's doing that. The Illum incident appears to have been shorter overall and included intervals between the attacks in which some survivors were able to escape.
What about now?
Yeah, we hear you now.
Good. Okay.
All right. I am going to send you the hyperlink. The one we are on. This is the report. We are on paragraph 97.
You ready?
Let me know when you are there.
I am, hold on. Where'd you send me the hyperlink through?
Discord. DMs in Discord.
Hold on. Actually, let me find my file real quick. I can't get to the DM, and I'm really embarrassed.
Send
Hello?
it to you. Yeah, I'm here. Let me send it to you some other way. You really must join. Well, at this point, Discord was launched in 2015. You must join us in 2015.
Here we go. Which page again?
We are on page 20? 21.
Perfect.
In Illum, some police were present at various points in the attack, which perhaps also accounted for the intervals, since these police forces were actively engaged in trying to push back the attackers, allowing intervals for escape and evacuation of the wounded. In Western Ream, shelter militants also abducted people following their attack. The commission was unable to verify whether people were abducted from Eastern Ream, Alum, or Barry shelters as well. Why don't, when you're ready, you take Attack on Zickham Beach and go ahead and read through that one out loud.
Are you talking about 95, 96?
98.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, we're ahead. Ooh. So we're already past then the Nova Festival.
Yes, I did that last time.
Okay. Yeah, that's I think that's where the majority of casualties were for civilians.
Yes.
So the attack on Zickham Beach. The attack on Zickham Beach was the only attack carried out on the 7th of October by sea. Security camera footage from the beach, verified by the commission, shows the attack began at 6:45 a.m. when one Hamas boat made landfall. Five-armed militants are seen emerging from the boat, running quickly towards the beach while shooting. According to several reports, as well as video footage viewed by the commission, the Israeli Navy managed to destroy 2 more approaching boats at sea. Sometime later, a second boat made landfall, and armed militants engaged in a firefight with the Israeli Navy from the beach. I'm sure that went really well for them. At 6:34, the Israeli Navy alerted the Rapid Response Unit of Kibbutz Zakim that there was an active infiltration situation. According to the Rapid Response Team, 9 armed militants reached the fence of Kibbutz Zakim, of which 4 were killed by the team and 5 escaped back to the beach. In a video published by Hamas after the attack, Hamas armed wing acknowledged responsibility for the attack on Zikim Beach and provided more detail on acts committed during the attack. In the video, one Hamas naval commando unit was seen mounting a rubber boat. The next scene in the video depicts a chase at sea and arrival at Zikim Beach. The video included scenes shot inside the toilet block at the beach, with Hamas armed wing claiming responsibility for killing those inside. According to Israeli sources, a total of 18 civilians, including 5 children, were killed on the beach that day. An investigation by media outlet Hamakom and other media reported that 19 persons were killed. The commission found that most victims were killed either in a public shelter on the beach or in the public toilet block. According to survivor statements, the shelter was attacked with grenades sometime between 6:45 and 6:56. In one testimony, a fisherman from Ashdod reported in a media interview, when he heard the sirens, he ran towards the public shelter located some 50 meters from the public toilet block. He said that at first 3 or 4 other fishermen were with him in the shelter, while others joined later. He hid under the electricity cabinet at the end of the shelter. He reported hearing something thrown into the shelter and feeling the explosion of a fragmentation grenade. He then saw 2 militants dressed in uniform, wearing flak jackets and carrying cloth. Father and son Ari and Eliyahu Uzan were killed in the shelter on the beach. Eliyahu's wife reported to media that he had called her and said that he was hiding in the shelter and that she lost contact with him soon after that. The commission listened to the recordings of phone calls and viewed screenshots of text messages corroborating the grenade attack on the shelter and providing more detail on what had happened after the attack. According to the original phone call recordings played in a news segment, at 6:56, one survivor of the grenade attack called the 102 firefighters helpline asked, what'd you say?
102.
Oh, 102, called 102 fire. Okay, so that's like their emergency line. Helpline asking for help, but the call center operator did not understand what he was saying. The survivors repeated the request, and the call center operator told them to call the police, stating terrorist is for the police. Arizan can be heard in the background of the call to 102 saying, Eli is dead, referring to his son, Eliyahu. At 7:02, the same survivor called the police call center, but there was no answer. At some point, one of those hiding in the shelter managed to reach the police helpline, and in recording, sounded frantic, saying, "Come quick, they're killing us in the shelter." He managed to tell the call center that he was in Zikim Beach, and the call ended with gunshots shortly after. Yeah, this is some heavy stuff. Available information suggests that at least 3 persons were alive in the shelter at the time of the calls to the helpline, including Arizan, may have been killed by the gunshots heard at the end of the call. At least 4 persons reportedly survived the shelter attack. One of the survivors said that she survived by pretending to be dead, and that the survivors distracted themselves from the shelter after hiding for several hours without Israeli security forces rescue assistance. Departing from this section a bit, the October 7th attacks bear so much in common in terms of the methodology with the Mumbai attacks that occurred. I think it was 2008. Do you remember that, Daedalus?
Sure, but I don't necessarily know if that's a significant point. It's a door with a little block building. You're going to attack it very similarly, one way or the other, however you choose to do it. Like,
I'm not even just talking. I'm talking about the attacks in general, like the methodology used. I'm not talking about the specific incidents, but basically the overall mission. Yeah, it's very similar methodology, and they actually went into Mumbai by boat, similarly to the Sikkim beach attack, and they brought with them a sufficient amount of ammunition, hand grenades. They didn't have RPGs at that time, but it was such a devastating sort of coordinated military style operation that actually Mumbai, their police force, was not able to respond. They had no rapid response team at that time. And they were actually fighting these pretty well armed Kashmiri, I think it was Kashmiri terrorists with like Enfield rifles and revolvers. But anyway, to 104, 5 teenagers, 4 boys, 1 girl, and 1 fisherman hid in the public toilet block in Sikkim Beach and were killed by Hamas militants sometime after 6:48. The 5 teenagers were 17-year-old Karl, 17-year-old Alina Weisburg, 17-year-old Nadav Tayeb, 16-year-old Mortasa, 17-year-old Tal Karen. The fisherman was Avi Hasidi. At approximately 6:48, Shahab sent a video depicting the situation of both hiding in the toilet block. The commission verified the video and notes that constant gunfire from outside the toilet block is clearly heard. At one point in the video, an armed Israeli security forces soldier is seen at the door, replacing his rifle cartridge. One teenager is heard saying, "It's a Hamas boat." The soldier responds, "Yes, it's a Hamas boat. They landed on the beach. There are snipers. I don't know how many. There's a lot of military." All 6 were killed by Hamas militants in the toilet block. Another video viewed by the commission filmed by Israeli first responders. Soldiers are seen arriving at the scene. The body of 1 armed militant is visible lying on the sand outside of the toilet block, and 5 bodies are seen inside. 1 soldier is heard saying, "It was a tough scene, but we have to clear them quickly. Guys, we have no gloves. We need to work with what we have." This conversation suggests that the Israeli security forces soldiers arriving at the scene were not trained for examining or clearing a crime scene.
I don't know if I would fault IDF troops for not being trained for clearing a crime scene. Not really.
I mean, that's not really what they're trained to do, right?
That's not
I mean, maybe they're military.
training.
That would be MPs at at best.
Does the IDF have MP?
Don't most militaries have a law enforcement arm?
I mean, they might. I guess they
Yeah,
do,
I don't
but
know
it's
for
not
sure.
4,500. Yeah, it's not.
Information was slow to reach families of those killed. Information was slow to reach families of those killed at Zakim Beach. This appears to be linked to the number of bodies arriving in Shura camp for identification, but also to the fact that the beach remained an active combat zone for a period of time after the attack, counting perhaps for the late detection of the bodies in the shelter. The commission documented several statements indicating that first responders only arrived at the beach sometime after the attack. The commission confirmed these details with the testimony of a first responder who stated that his unit was sent to Zakim Beach to comb the sand and look for human remains around 2 weeks after the attack. He stated that the unit had to be protected by Israeli security forces in its work as the area was still considered unsafe. So now we go to the attack on Nahal Oz military outpost. I'll have you do this one.
All right, yeah, we'll switch off each encounter. That way no one gets too tired. At least 8 Israeli military bases were attacked by members of Palestinian armed groups on 7 October. In the Nahal Oz outpost, members of the military wings of Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad killed 66 Israeli soldiers, including at least 20 female soldiers. Those killed were largely members of the 13th Battalion of the Golani Brigade and surveillance troops from the Unit 414 of the Combat Intelligence Collection Corps. 2 of the male soldiers who were killed were decapitated after death. In addition to these killings, members of the military arm of Hamas also abducted and brought to Gaza, stripped 7 female surveillance soldiers, one of whom was later rescued by Israeli security forces, and at least 1 has died in captivity. Those serving in the Intelligence Collection Corps include a 25 unarmed female. I can't even begin to pronounce that. A non-combat role.
I don't know. Okay. That's like my best.
Yeah. A non-combat role observing a portion of the fence and reporting on any security concerns, as well as operating a remote shooting system called C-Shoot. I'm sorry, what? Hang on. That's not a non-combat role then.
Yeah, I was just going to say.
This is where parts of this report kind of bother me, because they kind of... Yeah. Hang on, let's keep going. The attack against the Nahal Oz outpost base began at 06:29 when Palestinian militants started firing projectiles from the direction of the base. At approximately 6:30, surveillance soldiers in a command center of the base detected militants who approached the fence of the Gaza-Israeli border and blew up segments of the fence using explosives. Once the fence was breached, dozens of militants passed through and moved across the field towards the Nahal Oz outpost. According to one survivor, militants were heard inside the base at 0700. Around the same time, a surveillance soldier was later captured, was brought to Gaza by militants, sent her family a video she filmed in the shelter where off-duty surveillance soldiers were seeking protection. The video shows some 22 unarmed women dressed in pajamas gathered against the wall of a shelter. And an armed Israeli soldier in camouflage can be seen at the other end of the shelter, seemingly guarding one of its entrances. The women in the video appear to be frightened as the sounds of detonations and shootings can be heard outside the shelter. The video ends with a loud explosion, and the soldier at the exit is seen looking at his phone. According to the survivor testimony, the soldier received a phone call informing him of the infiltration and left the shelter to take action. The commission assesses this video was filmed immediately before the militants breached the outpost, and shooting sounds came from fighting around the perimeter walls. At 7:20, 5 armed members of the Israeli Army Sky Riders unit were tasked to safeguard both entrances of the shelter and an unarmed surveillance soldier inside it. Unarmed surveillance soldiers inside it, excuse me. In a photograph that Captain Eden Nimri, the commander of the Sky Riders unit, sent to her parents, 2 of her subordinates can be seen aiming their weapons at the entrance of the shelter. The shelter was attacked by militants at 7:45 when a Hamas military wing operative wearing a distinctive green headband and armed with an AK-47 entered. The militant was immediately shot dead by Nimri and her team members. Other militants then threw 3 grenades into the shelter and engaged in a shootout with Nimri. Covered by Nimri, the other 4 members of the Sky Riders and 6 of the surveillance shelter soldiers escaped to the back entrance of the shelter. Who remained behind was killed shortly afterwards in the shelter. The 10 women who escaped managed to reach 2 rooms and living quarters where they locked themselves in. Militants who were already controlling the living quarters attempted to break into the 2 rooms several times, but having failed to do so, eventually left. The 10 women spent 6 hours in the rooms before they were rescued. I have questions. The commission found that at least 3 more female soldiers managed to escape from the shelter during the shootout. All 3 are later killed by the militants while hiding in other locations of the base. The other women who did not manage to escape from the shelter, possibly 13 in number, were either killed or abducted. At about 1,200, militants threw grenades. Through several grenades came a flammable substance at the entrance of the command center, setting the building on fire. A Golani Brigade soldier tries to extinguish the fire, but was unsuccessful. The fire spread quickly and smoke started to penetrate into the command center. At around 12:30, the soldiers started searching for a way out, but the door to the emergency exit was on fire and could not be approached. Eventually, the soldiers found a small window in the bathroom, which was smashed by the operations officer of the Golani Brigades, allowing her, 5 other Golani officers, and 1 surveillance soldier to escape outside and hide in another building. 15 soldiers were unable to escape and died from smoke inhalation and fire. According to ISF interim investigation into the attack on Nahal Oz base, grenades thrown in the command center released an unspecified toxic gas that caused suffocation and loss of consciousness within minutes. Okay, but that's inconsistent with what they said. People escaped. The grenades were thrown at 12. By 12:30, they were escaping. This is why I have such a huge problem with Israeli reports of this violence, because what is the toxic gas? Why is this inconsistent with the reports that are being given by the survivors? Killing of soldiers who are horrors to combat. The commission analyzed digital footage indicating the majority of the female soldiers seeking refuge inside the shelter at Nahal Oz were unarmed and wearing civilian clothes during the attack. Militants filmed the killing or abduction of several female soldiers, most of whom were young women around 19 years old who were unarmed, wounded, captured, and or showing signs of having surrendered. Why were they unarmed? In addition, the commission viewed 2 videos filmed in what appears to be an office of the Nahal Oz outposts during the attack. The commission assesses that both videos were recovered from the body cameras of Palestinian militants. The first video shows 3 armed militants, including 1 identified as a member of Hamas, entering the room. A woman in white pajamas can be seen hiding under a desk. She appears to be wounded, and there's a bloodstain in the front of her trousers and lower abdominal area. The militants are heard discussing in Arabic the number and whereabouts of other female soldiers in that room. They count 3 women. One of the militants then moves a chair that seemingly blocks their access to the table, and the gunman beside the cameraman shoots 3 times at the unarmed woman hiding under the desk. The video then ends. In the second video, which appears to be a direct continuation of the first video and to have been filmed immediately after the first video, 6 more rounds can be heard in the room. One of the women starts and then screaming, and then another gunshot can be heard, at which the screaming ends abruptly. The camera moves down, and the woman in white pajamas from the first video can be seen under the desk, seemingly dead. Another body in the military boots and camouflage can be seen lying beside her. One of the militants says, "This is the 4th one that we did not kill," and the video ends. Alright. Yeah, most female IDF are part of non-combat units. But let's take, for example, an American non-combat soldier deployed as part of a combat unit, which you basically would have the Nahal Oz base have been. They would have, at the very least, a weapon of some sort to hand. They were in a... Hello, Sunday's chat. A weapon close at hand to defend themselves with. The fact that these women were completely unarmed is odd to me as a matter of protocol.
Yeah, I was just going to say, wouldn't they, or at least have access to the armory, and aren't they're given basic training to utilize these weapons in the event of an attack on the base, right? Isn't that the case for the U.S. Army?
Yes, even if you're not a combat unit, you're usually carrying a weapon in a field environment.
Yeah.
Like a basic familiarization of with weapons is Yes. Okay. Let's take a short break. Hi, everybody. Yes, we have been monetized. You can find the super chat button and the join button. We would be most appreciative if you availed
Donate
yourself of
something.
those options.
Help
Also,
us fund our dreams of creating a think tank.
yeah, well, that's an entirely different conversation.
That's a completely different thing. Yeah.
Why don't you pick up paragraph 116?
Paragraph 116, okay. The Commission found significant evidence that members of armed groups severely tortured and mistreated victims in several locations. The Commission documented images, videos, and information from victim and witness testimonies. The Commission also documented testimonies of first responders who assessed the status of bodies found in different locations, as well as bodies brought to a central sorting and identification camp named Camp Shura. The Commission concludes that acts of torture and mistreatment were widespread. In most instances, the Commission could not conclusively determine whether victims were subjected to mistreatment before or after death. See, that's the problem with all of this. You know, like, it's there were so many false reports about it.
Well, we talked a little bit about this too before.
Yeah.
The problem is principally that the first responders who were sent in were not forensic technicians or trained for crime scenes. And
No, and I think when you're at most, these people, these first responders, you know, in their daily the daily duties of their job, what are they going to respond to? Mostly like accidents and things like that. So I think that it was maybe a shock to their system
well, it was
to
even
have
more.
to.
It was that particular religious group that went in that don't have that, like, they're basically body collectors. They don't have
Okay, yeah. So they get a Jewish burial. Okay,
so like these
yeah,
so like they came out and they saw the things they said, and it's not like they were trained observers of these situations. So like
no,
everything looked a lot more horrible than it like you have these people who are incalculated into this particular view of how Palestinians treat Jewish people, and they see this horrible scenes of destruction, right?
yeah,
And they look at it and they say, "Oh my God, this is barbarism." So there's babies in ovens and beheaded children and etc. etc. etc.
of course. But I want to stress something to our viewers and just people in general who might come across this video. Just because it wasn't what these people were describing
No,
doesn't take away anything from the horror that actually happened.
and that's kind of why I wanted to do this point by point,
Yeah,
because I think there has been a lot said, not necessarily in our circles, but there's been a lot said by people trying to downplay what happened. And here's the thing. I don't I, I understand political impetus on both sides to downplay what happens to the Palestinians in Gaza by Israeli supporters, and to downplay what Hamas did by people who are kind of misguidedly trying to support Hamas as a representative of Palestine.
yeah.
Um,
Um,
I
let's
understand the impetus,
continue.
but that's not a good thing to.
It's not a good thing to do either, and ultimately, Hamas is they are, and I'm not trying to repeat Israeli points here, but they bear a lot of responsibility on the subsequent events occurring.
They bear
They
absolutely
didn't have.
zero
They didn't have. What'd you say?
responsibility for anything that Israel has done. They like Israel is guilty of their own war crimes, and Hamas is guilty of their own war. There is no ground upon which a fair-minded person can say that Israel is been provoked by Hamas into committing war crimes. They're doing that of their own accord.
No, I agree with you there. I agree that these war crimes are being I'm not trying to blame the victims here, but they brought that war with this attack, which was not. I mean, that's the nature of the organization, right? This is what they plan to do. But that in itself is pretty repugnant, that they would actually do this knowing that the response would be like a fucking hammer.
Well,
To put it very mildly, by the way.
the problem I have with this argument is that it doesn't. October 6th was still a day that Israelis were killing Palestinians.
But not like this.
Not like this, no, but like
Not like this. This is at the level that we're seeing, and within the small geographic area, that it's being committed. This is out of a really terrible 20th and 21st century for Palestinians. This is by far even worse. This is worse than 1948 for them. This is the largest tragedy, not just tragedy, but crime that has befallen them. And that's, I mean, we're talking about a list of not insignificant crimes. Not all, by the way, committed by Israel. Like, I'm including in there, Black September with, Jordan, the Sabra and Shatila massacres.
well, that was
Lebanon.
Israel. That was
That is Israel too. That's a joint. That's a joint criminal enterprise with Israel and the I don't know, Maronite or whatever Christian phalangist groups. Yeah, but this tops them all. And of course that the weight of that responsibility, it is on Israel, but this could have it could have been avoided, of course, in the response that they're going to carry out. It's interesting. I was talking to a friend of mine, an old Soviet Jewish man. We met for dinner today, but we were actually talking about this, and he actually was and he's not a real conservative guy, like pretty, he was of the belief that, Israel was conducting this in a very careful way, even more so than the U.S. Army in Vietnam, for example. There's a little bit of a bias there because, in the Soviet Union, they were taught about the Vietnam War and, sort of a lot of the news coming into them was of, American atrocities there. And there was a lot of atrocities. It's actually not really talked about that much. There's a really good book on it called Kill Anything That Moves that uses some very, very good very, very good firsthand sources. But in any case, he was kind of making this comparison, and I'm thinking in my head that Gaza's one gigantic free fire zone, and I've brought this up several times in our conversations about it. Anyway, let me continue to read the report on torture. I'll continue with 117, but I think that, every conflict, there's no such thing as a good war. And every conflict, just about every conflict, is paired with these, war crimes or, crimes against non-combatants. And this is a really bad one.
Well, I think it's important to make this distinction again and again, and particularly when you're talking about Vietnam, that the United States military radically changes attitude and approach to preventing war crimes.
That is true, actually.
There's a significant, and here's where it comes down to. like, argue if you will about the necessity of the existence of war, but for the time being, war is what's going to happen. So I think in cases where we have countries who are belligerent, and engage in hostilities, that they should be held to these. And the problem is, and we see this with Russia too, with the attacks on the hospitals, is have normalized the commission of these war crimes, and normalized saying that there isn't anything we.
By the way, my host sister was at that hospital. She was the one who she was hit by a car recently, but I actually talked to her today about it. Shout out to Dasha. She's wonderful, wonderful young woman. But yeah, she was at this children's hospital. She's 16, so like they still sent her that, and thank God. I didn't even actually know that she was in that. I just happened to check Telegram, and I saw a message from her, and she said you should really reconsider making a visit to Ukraine anytime soon. And yeah,
let's not get too far off topic here.
Yeah. But anyway,
we've normalized allowing certain countries to commit these war crimes. Israel is a massive black mark in our ability to credibly talk about these things and deal with these problems.
Of course, and it's a big problem with the global South too, because our defense of Israel then is like, why should, if it, in terms of like, the argument is, I see Gaza and Ukraine being compared all the time. And, there's a lot of people in the Gaza camp who sort of discount the Ukrainian suffering, in this war, because the rate of, like in terms of the death rate in Gaza, it's higher than in Ukraine in terms of like,
that's people playing stupid human games. I'm talking about,
of course, yeah.
I'm talking about the whole concept behind the fact that we kind of like an entire NATO conference happened today. And basically they sat there going, well, it's not great that Russia's hammering Ukraine with cruise missiles, but what you gonna do? We're not talking about individual instances, Jem. We're talking about the United States military's policies regarding training soldiers on trying to avoid the commission of war crimes. Go ahead, pick up at 117.
Yep. In most instances, the commission could not conclusively determine whether victims were subjugated to mistreatment before or after death. Additionally, several cases documented by the commission could not be attributed to a specific location, since bodies had been removed from the scene of the crime and images of bodies were released centrally by Israeli authorities. Unfortunately, there appears to have been little or no thorough forensic examination of bodies undertaken by Israeli authorities. That is really bad. I mean, that's basic shit.
Well, it's gonna hinder any prosecution in international. Like, it's not gonna hinder the Israeli courts; they're just gonna execute these people. But it's gonna hinder any international prosecution of Hamas's leadership.
I know that's really basic. That's basic criminal.
What they're going to do? Well, what's going to happen is Israel's going to turn around. They're going to not like what'll probably happen is that the arrest warrants will be granted, and some of the people will be tried, maybe in absentia even. But what'll happen is that they won't be able to convict Sinwar, and he'll walk off. And then Israel go, well, look at how ineffective the court is. And
the commission has
sorry, go ahead.
The commission has documented evidence suggesting that some victims were subjugated to decapitation or attempted decapitation. The commission verified one such incident from Kibbutz Nir Oz. A video viewed and verified by the commission shows two attackers dressed in civilian clothing and speaking in Arabic, physically abusing a victim who is lying on the floor with his eyes closed, but who is still visibly alive. The commission determined that the victim was a Thai national residing and working in Nir Oz. The victim's shirt and right arm were covered with blood, likely from an abdominal wound. The video shows the attackers hitting the victim with a knife on his left shoulder. A few seconds later, one of the attackers kicks the victim in the head, and the victim tries to cover his head. One attacker then picks up a garden hoe and repeatedly hits the victim's neck. A few seconds later, another attacker picks up the hoe, repeatedly hits the victim's upper neck, body, and right arm. The video is cut at this point. Based on the available evidence, the commission includes that this attack was committed by armed Palestinians in civilian clothes, likely belonging to the group who joined the attack on Nir Oz later in the morning. The commission could not conclude definitively whether definitively which armed group committed the act, or whether they were committed by civilians from Gaza directly participating in hostilities. The commission analyzed digital materials released by Hamas's military wing and Palestinian Islamic Jihad and found evidence indicating that at least 3 Israeli soldiers were decapitated in military bases on the 7th of October. In the first case, the commission viewed a video released by Hamas military wing on the 7th of October and geolocated it to the Nahal Oz military outpost. The video shows 2 bodies of Israeli soldiers. One body of an officer of lieutenant rank is seen lying on his back and appears to be intact, with the exception of some fingers of his left hand that appear to have been partially or fully severed. The video shows a man in civilian clothes standing upon the body with a knife. In a photograph published by Hamas, which was geolocated by the commission to the Nahal Oz military outpost, the same soldier is lying in the same position and appears to have been decapitated. Based on the analysis of the video and the image, the commission concludes that in this case, a soldier was decapitated after death. The second body appears to be intact. Given the video and the picture were published by Hamas military wing, the commission concludes that Hamas military wing was responsible for these acts. In the second case, the commission analyzed another video filmed by militants on 7th of October depicting the aftermath of an attack on an Israeli military base, which the commission was not able to identify. 4 male bodies are visible in the video and are positioned next to a low structure. One body is dressed in combat webbing and another is in civilian clothes. 2 other bodies are seen lying nearby, both dressed in Israeli army uniform. Both bodies appear to have been decapitated. The video contained no additional information about the victims, and the commission could not determine whether the acts were committed before or after death. The commission could not conclude definitively which armed group committed the act, or whether they were committed by civilians directly participating in hostilities. In another video published on social media following the 7th of October, 2 masked men with Palestinian Islamic Jihad insignia are seen holding the severed head of a man. The video contains no additional information about the victim, and the commission could not determine whether the man was beheaded before or after death. The commission documented digital evidence of burnt bodies in several locations. According to some reports, the perpetrators used an accelerating agent which created high temperatures and caused extensive damage to bodies. The commission was unable to determine whether the victims had been burnt alive or their bodies burned after death. Bodies of women were found in several locations completely or partially burnt. Some of the bodies were burned beyond recognition and or decapitated. The commission reviewed photos of the burnt skull of a decapitated woman found in Kfar Aza. The commission also reviewed photos of a 12-year-old girl who was shot in the head and then decapitated. Fucking Christ.
All right, hang on.
The commission...
From here on out, before we continue, the rest of the report, how do they know there was an accelerant? There's no indication that the chemical testing was provided to the UN. The UN is taking Israel's word for that. From here on out, we're talking about incredibly graphic events already. I am going to make a small supposition, because from here on out, we're talking about basically being decapitated. We're talking about sexual assault and violence against children and elderly people. Let's move ahead to the portion about the Israeli counterattacks. and avoid traumatizing the hell out of people.
I mean, part of me wants to, let this be known, but yeah. Okay.
We have this posted up for people to find. If they want to go through it, they can. I don't think it's wise to do that on a stream 5 days after we have just been approved, or like, a day.
Okay. Yeah, I got it. All right.
I
got it.
This is extensively brutal violence through the rest of this year. It is horrifying. I'm moving past this. It's not a statement of its accuracy or validity. That's not in my purview to state. But it is beyond the pale of what we can cover responsibly here. Israeli counteroffensive. General information. Having examined the evidence of the events of the 7 October, the Commission finds the Israeli security forces' response to the attack was significantly delayed and in many places inadequate. Small teams of Israeli ground forces appeared in several locations during the morning hours, but they were slow to arrive, insufficient in numbers, and lacked coordination with Central Command and with each other. Several tanks were also active that day, both at border locations and in civilian villages. In many kibbutzim, the local rapid deployment security forces fought against the attackers, saving many lives with very little or no external reinforcement. In the Nova Festival site, local police assigned to secure the festival conducted much of the fighting against the militants, aided by intermittently independently deployed Israeli security forces until the early afternoon when more reinforcements arrived. Although the situation differed between the various locations, in general, the Commission observes that in most locations, more significant and organized Israeli security forces only arrived in the early afternoon. The Commission found that Israeli security forces based in outposts around Ataf Aza were forced to defend their positions and engage in battles in the military bases, which were also attacked and were not able to deploy to the civilian villages to provide assistance. In some cases, the absence of the deployment to the civilian villages was due to lack of knowledge of the various attack sites, given the poor communication, and due to this lack of communication, a belief that each army team, that they were the only ones under attack. One commander, a major in the Israeli Security Forces 77th Armored Corps Battalion, spoke about the Armored Corps situation that day. Each individual tank does not understand if there's a situation in the whole area. It also does not understand why nobody's coming to help, and there's no liaising factor that says go here or go there. So basically, there is a total lack of Israeli command and control. There is anarchy. He also summarized the perception of the Israeli security forces' failure that day, saying, at the end of the day, Kibbutzim Beri, Kibbutzim Nahal Oz, and the party, all these kibbutzim were in our area. And with all these heroics we hear about, a lot of these stories occurred within the bases. Our rationale for being there was not to defend ourselves, it was to defend the civilians. Unfortunately, that morning, we did not have the picture to even start trying to take those. The Commission observes that the Israeli security forces failed to understand the magnitude of the attack and were unprepared to respond to an attack on the scale of October 7th. They were overwhelmed by the large number of locations of simultaneous attacks on bases, kibbutzim, and town in the area, lacked effective communication between forces on the ground and higher command, and failed to understand the full tactical situation on the ground due to militants rendering surveillance equipment ineffective earlier in the day. In relation to ground forces, the Commission documented several accounts of individual members of ISF who decided largely on their own accord to deploy to Atzaf area and to help with counteroffensives. Others consulted ISF members of various ranks prior to deployment. Any of these self-deployed members lived in locations or near the area. In some instances, armed Israeli civilians decided to join battles independently. That's okay. These deployments appeared to be disorganized, with the Israeli security force members picking up their soldiers on the way and diverting to other locations, without clear orders from military leadership. In one case, the head of the Gavadi Brigade, who lives in the village Metamir, some 45 minutes drive from the Gaza border area, stated in a media interview that he heard sirens and explosions and called Southern Command, who told him to go to Siderat. On his way, he picked up some soldiers who were stationed nearby. He received a call from another Israeli security force members who told him to go to Kar Asa and Nal Azal. He took the decision to go to Kar Asa while calling on other Givati forces to join him at various locations in Israel. In another case, head of the Israeli Security Force Reserve Unit, HUD 71, Lieutenant Colonel Mir Kamiri, informally conscripted his unit and called it into battle without receiving a deployment or conscription instruction. In locations where Israeli security ground forces were present in the early morning hours, most on self-deployment, there is mass confusion, including around the coordination with local rapid response units. Identification of militants and insufficient forces to push back attackers. Soldiers reported feeling helpless and not knowing when reinforcements would arrive. A police officer fighting in Kfar Aza filmed frantic scenes through his body camera, showing calls for additional forces to supply. Calls for medical assistance and his confusion over how to identify militants when some were dressed in civilian clothes and roaming through the kibbutz freely. In relation to the Israeli Security Forces Armored Corps, reports indicate that some 23 tanks were stationed throughout the whole border area with Gaza, many of them unmanned. That's a good thing for a tank to be. Southern reach of the Gaza battalion had 6 man tanks covering 35 kilometers of border. Not going to do it either. According to the testimony of tank crews based in the Mars outpost on 6:30 on October 7th, the crews were woken by rocket attacks and decided to drive their tanks towards the border. While they were driving, they received an order from Colonel Asaf Hamarami, commander of the 7th Brigade, to move to the fields towards Kibbutz Narim and defend the kibbutz. On their way, they noticed militants and engaged in battle. The tank crews reported 22 different breaches of the border and 10 different fighting locations, all in the southern reach. They drove towards military identification point 179, close to Nir Oz. The burnt-out tank was standing with nobody inside. The crews thought that the Israeli security forces had been abducted. In the same area at point 179, they noticed hundreds of people crossing into Israel and back to Gaza, and they shot at them, including vehicles laden with people, some of whom may have been hostages. Several other tank teams joined battles from a base further south in Nitzana, where tanks were stationed to secure the border between Israel and Egypt. At least 3 tanks came from Nitzana, one positioned at the fence near Kasufum, and went to Kibbutz Holet to fend off militants, and a third joined the battle at the Safa outpost. In relation to the Israeli Air Force, the Commission confirmed that at least 8 Apache helicopters were dispatched to the area around the Gaza border on 7 October, observing the situation on Road 232, attacking militants and others crossing over from Gaza through the breaches of the fence, and providing air support to forces battling at the Nahal Oz outpost. Reportedly shooting at targets in Kibbutzim Karim Shalom. Video statements by Apache helicopter pilots included in Israeli news segment assert that 2 Apache helicopters from Squadron 113 were in the air and carrying out attacks on Israeli soil from the early hours of October 7th at 6:50. The 2 helicopter crews who were already on alert at the base were sent to their helicopters. At 7, they were on their way to the Gaza border. One of the helicopters was deployed to Sakim with instructions to assist the Navy to thwart the entry of boats onto Israeli shores. At 7:35, 2 additional helicopters arrived from a base in the north of the country and were sent to the area of Nahal Oz base. The Israeli Air Force also faced challenges in distinguishing civilians from combatants. One of the pilots said in an interview, "I understand that I will have a dilemma where are our forces and where are the enemy forces, if at all, and who are civilians?" Another pilot, Lieutenant Colonel A, names redacted at source, stated that when he started firing at people crossing over the fence into Israel, a third pilot, Lieutenant Colonel E, stated that he had arrived at 7:50 and saw lots of bonfires and small arms fire, and focused on a group of perceived militants approaching one of the military outposts. Helicopters also directed fire on the breaches in the fence where they shot at people and vehicles entering Israel. By 10 o'clock, there was reportedly 8 attack helicopters in the air. One of the pilots stated that at some point they realized the Israelis were being abducted and taken back to Gaza. He said, I allow myself to say that I already understand how targets operate. An abducted person will not run into the middle of a group of people without anyone holding them. I choose targets that I say to myself that the chance that I am shooting at abductees is low, but it is not 100%. In addition to Apaches, at least one Yasser helicopter was in the air, was shot down by militants in the late morning near Kibbutz Be'eri while deploying troops. According to reports, the footage reviewed by the commission, all troops in the helicopter managed to escape. 6 Israeli police helicopters were also in the air and faced challenges in coordinating their operations with the Israeli Air Force. The commission viewed footage and conversations between police helicopters, pilots, and the Israeli Air Force contained in an Israeli TV news segment, with the latter instructing police not to deploy to active battle scenes without the accompaniment of an attack helicopter. Police helicopter pilot is heard in response saying, Roger, sometimes we have to take risks. We know there is an incident of a force in danger in Siderat. The idea is to get eyes on them and understand who is against who. To build the picture there, the pilot tries again. We're happy to deploy for 15 minutes to give him a picture. There's a massacre there, friends. Yet the Israeli Air Force persisted in its restrictions, noting that the fear that militants will use anti-aircraft missiles against the unarmed helicopters. Police helicopter decided to ignore the Israeli Air Force instructions and deploy to Siderat anyway, where it hovered over the police station, providing information to the police forces fighting inside and requesting Israeli attack helicopter assistance. The remaining 5 police helicopters undeployed for liaison communication and deconfliction between the ISF, IAF, and police on the ground throughout the day.
Let me go to.
You want to take this one here?
Yeah. So 212. 10 members of the kibbutz. So this is the Israeli forces counteroffensive in Kibbutz Be'eri. 10 members of the kibbutz's rapid response team were on the first line of defense for Be'eri residents. At 7:30, 2 members of the response team had been killed and another 3 wounded. The wounded were taken to the dental clinic where the remaining medical staff were hiding. Once inside, the clinic was barricaded and defended by the remaining members of the response team. At 13:50, the rapid response team, still defending the dental clinic, ran out of ammunition. The attackers broke into the building, according to a recorded call by a paramedic, Amit Man, who was treating the wounded in the clinic. At 14:15, militants shot her in the legs and killed most others in the building. Despite wearing a medic uniform, Amit Man was also killed by the attackers. The only survivors of the clinic were another nurse who was hiding in the clinic's bathroom and one member of the response team who was taken for dead by the attackers. They were evacuated from the clinic by the Israeli security forces sometime between 1600 and 1830 and October 7th. The first external response force, comprising of 5 counterterrorism unit Yamam officers, approached the entrance of the kibbutz as early as 7:37, where they joined some members of the rapid response team. Overwhelmed by the militants and suffering losses, they retreated an hour later. At 9 a.m., a 14-member team of the Israeli Air Force unit 5101 Shaldak was airlifted by helicopter close to the kibbutz. The team positioned itself at the entrance, trying to block the arrival of more militants, resulting in some clashes. After several hours, however, the unit was outnumbered, and it too was forced to retreat. At 1300, the Shaldak unit returned to the kibbutz, reinforced by the General Staff's reconnaissance unit. That's a Sayred Makal. It's pretty famous. Only at around 14:30, some 7 hours after the start of the attack, Israeli security forces started to recapture the communal and residential buildings of the kibbutz. However, due to the relatively small number of forces, the advance was slow. At 1600, additional Israeli security forces Forces ground troops were with Armor Corps soldiers manning 2 tanks were deployed to the site, and sometime after 1600 began regaining control and started evacuating residents. According to witness testimony, even after being deployed to the kibbutz vicinity, Israeli security forces failed to dispatch all available forces into the kibbutz to fend off the attack and assist the civilian population. Video footage retrieved from a police helicopter indicates that at 16:23, a large Israeli security forces convoy gathered in front of the yellow gate of the kibbutz, but did not move inside. Large members of the Israeli security forces were seen still waiting outside the kibbutz gate as of 1810. According to the testimony of a member of the kibbutz rapid response team who observed 500 IDF soldiers were outside, organized with dogs, with equipment, weapons, and armored vehicles, and they were standing outside, and not a single one of them is doing anything. They kept repeating, "The field isn't sterile. The field isn't sterile." This testimony was confused by other survivors who witnessed Israeli troops at the entrance of the kibbutz at this time. At 2200, on the 8th of October, Israeli forces announced that it was in control of the kibbutz, while the full elimination of all militants was reported at the afternoon of 9th of October. So I can continue with this one. Israeli security forces counteroffensive in kibbutz Nir Oz. Israeli security forces provided no external assistance to kibbutz Nir Oz during the 7th of October attack, leaving the local rapid response team to fend for itself. According to reports, the kibbutz rapid response team did not have sufficient ammunition, and many of the team did not manage to reach the armory to get their weapons, and so were essentially unarmed. At least one member of the rapid response team was killed during the attack, and the commander of the team was injured. At 1350, the first Israeli security forces started arriving at the kibbutz, including fighters from a Marine Commando, that's Shayetet 13 unit, who arrived by helicopter at 1440. Despite the forces' arrival, the departure of the militants back to Gaza, messages continue to be sent from the kibbutz chat groups with requests for help until 1730. It appears that kibbutz Nir Oz suffered in particular from the vacuum of information inside the Israeli security forces, which resulted in no reinforcements sent. An investigation by Haaretz claimed that even when Israeli security forces command knew about the situation in the villages, they prioritized the protection of military assets that day. Moreover, those few Israeli security force teams that were deployed that day to the area before more reinforcements arrived were sent to Kfar Aza, Nahal Az, Beri, Kisufim, Nirim, Nirtzak, Kolit, and Kerim Shalom. None were sent to Nir Oz until after the militants had left. I'll let you take this one.
Israeli security forces counteroffensive at the Nova Festival site. At around 12:30, the first Israeli security forces reinforcements began to arrive at the Nova site, joining the remaining police who had been assigned to work at the festival. Some limited police reinforcements who had arrived throughout the morning, and several soldiers from the army who arrived independently at the same scene. Two of the soldiers were a brigadier general reserve and his son, an officer in the Gaza battalion, who were living in one of the kibbutzim in the area and had been trying to reach the Gaza battalion base in Re when they stopped to assist fleeing festival goers at the intersection between the Nova Festival and Road 232. According to video testimony, they were armed with handguns only and were positioned for a while among the cars at the traffic jam at the exit into Road 232. The two, who had seen militants on their way from home, tried to warn the goers to flee through the fields east of the site. At the junction, they joined several police officers who were working at the festival, and the group tried to hold their position against approaching militants. They eventually entered a car driven by one of the policemen and drove south, stopped after a few hundred meters, and at a parked tank and joined a group of police who formed a defensive position behind the tank where tens of festival goers were hiding. The commission confirmed the presence of this tank at the Nova Festival site through multiple testimonies and visual evidence, which protected some 30 fleeing festival goers. According to the tank driver's testimony given to the Israeli media, the tank was part of the 77th Battalion of the Armored Corps that had been stationed close to the perimeter fence and had participated in the initial battles against approaching militants that morning. The tank driver reported his crew killed 15 militants before being shot at with an anti-tank missile, after which he drove the tank away from the scene to escape additional hits. At 8:20, he reached the Ream site where he noticed many parked cars. He was not aware of a festival taking place at the location. He saw a battle underway between approximately 10 police officers and 50 militants. The tank's cannon was not working, so he decided to position the tank between the police and militants to block off the militants' access. At 8:30, the position was largely overrun, and the militants started climbing on the tank. The tank driver drove off as grenades were thrown into the tank, running over militants in his wake. Eventually, coming to a stop on a clearing some 500 meters south of the intersection, he then escaped from the tank, suffering from injuries and hid in a nearby location. Additional footage recovered from that day and viewed by the commission confirms these details. I suspect the crew was killed when the missile hit them. Additional footage recovered from the day viewed by the commission confirms these details. In a video viewed by the commission, a tank is seen driving alongside abandoned vehicles, running over some of them at the intersection between the Nova Festival and Road 232. Around 10 o'clock, people fleeing from the festival started congregating behind the tank. 2 surviving festival goers stated in a media interview that upon noticing the tank, they entered it to look for ammunition or weapons. They reported the tank was abandoned and contained the bodies of soldiers. The Brigadier General Reserve reportedly manned the defense of the position. The group found 1 machine gun in the tank and used it to defend the position over the next several hours, with some 30 fleeing festival goers taking cover behind the tank. According to a statement, he informed the Gaza Battalion of his position and requested the deployment of an attack helicopter to assist in the battle. He stated that a helicopter was sent to their position but could not fire since the pilot could not distinguish between civilians and militants. However, according to him, the presence of the helicopter in the air served as a deterrent to the militants, who reduced the intensity of their attack. Footage viewed by the commission from the area around the tank shows some 30 people hiding behind the tank, which is flanked by a parked white van on one side and a black vehicle on the other. Some of those who are hiding are lying on the ground and appear to be wounded. 2 men are seen wearing combat helmets and civilian clothes. These are likely the 2 men who found helmets inside the tank. The group includes 2 armed policemen in the footage. One man in a blue uniform is seen speaking on the phone, is likely the Brigadier General. The 2 others who took cover behind the tank were Palestinian citizens of Israel who had been working at the Nova Festival. They stated in an interview that they dug a ditch under the tank in order to hide. They hid in that location with other injured people, including 1 person who was injured from an RPG fired towards the tank. According to surviving witnesses, everyone who hid behind the tank survived. Want to pick this one up?
Yep. Israeli security forces counteroffensive at Zakim Beach. In Zakim Beach, Israeli security forces learned of the impending attack after several Hamas boats had already left Gaza and were notified by the Navy lookout officers. The security coordinator of Kibbutz Zakim reported that at 6:34 he had received a call from the Israeli Navy that the Israeli Navy had declared a Parish situation, Israeli security forces code for infiltration, reporting that several boats had left Gaza and 4 boats were approaching Zakim Beach. The security coordinator reported understanding that 2 of the boats were headed to Moderators military base, and 2 others were headed to Ashkelon. Reportedly, 4 of the 7 boats were intercepted by the Navy at sea, 1 of which went up in flames. The commission viewed video footage of the Navy's counteroffensive confirms that while 1 rubber boat was burning some distance away, soldiers upon a Navy boat were shooting and throwing grenades at militants who were in the water. The Navy boat in the video is seen approaching the Vikim power station from the south. The commission assesses that the Navy was chasing boats that were trying to aim for Ashkelon. Video footage from the beach security camera shows that two boats made landfall on Zakim Beach. Some 50 meters apart, 5 Hamas militants emerged from the boat at 6:45, running towards the beach and shooting. Well, shortly after, 4 Hamas militants emerged from the second boat and headed for the beach. Okay, this is about the Hannibal directive.
Stop here.
Yeah.
Lift thine eyes to
All right, I am back. Hey, are you there? Are you back?
Yep.
Now I am back. Left. All right.
Where did we leave off the Hannibal Directive?
Yes, the commission documented strong indications that the Hannibal Directive was used in several instances on October 7th, harming Israelis at the same time as striking Palestinian militants. In relation to the Nova site, several reports claim that Israeli helicopters were present at the Nova site and may have shot at targets on the ground, including civilian vehicles. The commission verified the presence of at least 8 attack helicopters at the Outaf Eza at various times, and October 7th, 1 or 2 over the festival in the mid-morning hours. This is based on the testimony of a Palestinian citizen of Israel who's working at the festival and stated in an interview that shortly after the militants arrived, he saw a helicopter hovering over the site. Additionally, a reserve brigade general who fought against the militants near a parked tank stated that he called the Gaza battalion to request an attack helicopter and that one was deployed, although it served for deterrence purposes only. A report in Heratz claimed that after the attack, ISF Southern Command identified 77 car wrecks shot by Israeli tanks, helicopters, or drones. A similar allegation was made by an Israeli news publication stating that one of the first indications of a mass abduction incident received at ISF force around noon on 7. A Hannibal Directive was issued directing pilots and other Israeli security forces to target all vehicles returning to Gaza that day. Although the commission confirmed the presence of helicopters in the area, it was unable to confirm whether these helicopters directed firepower at any actual targets in the Nova area, vehicles or otherwise. This shouldn't be, like, if they had done proper forensics, they could. Like, they could go, well, this is a 20-millimeter hole like an Apache has, blah, 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 blah. Video statement by an Israeli security tank driver viewed by the commission. One tank team knowingly applied the Hannibal Directive that. In a statement given to Israeli news channel, the tank driver and commander stated that they targeted 2 Toyota vehicles with militants and Israelis. This occurred at point 179 close to Kibbutzim near Oz. They noted that there are many people standing in the back of the pickup trucks and appeared to be a pile of other people next to them. The tank team could not confirm whether these people were alive or dead at the time. They shot towards the 2 vehicles and assessed they hit the first vehicles and may have missed the second. Asked why I decided to shoot the vehicles, something in my gut made me feel that they could be on them on the vehicles. Yes, I could have killed them, but I decided that was the right decision. I prefer stopping the abduction so they won't be taken. But I decided this was the right decision so they won't be taken. The commander also clarified that the Hannibal Directive involves several stages. When you implement the order itself, there are several gradual things you need to do. You need to direct fire to blocking locations and control points. And when you have recognition, you also have to do that thing, referring to the Hannibal Directive. He concluded saying that to his knowledge, he did not kill any soldiers. This is... You want to pick this one up? 277 or 227?
Yeah, give me one moment. 227?
Yeah.
The commission verified information indicating that in at least 2 other cases, Israeli security forces' counter-offensive actions resulted in harm to and the killing of Israeli civilians. And in one of the cases, the actions were undertaken with clear knowledge of this risk. According to the commission's investigation, in these 2 cases, at least 14 Israeli civilians were likely killed as a result of Israeli security forces' fire. 1 woman was killed by helicopter fire while being taken from kibbutz near Oz to Gaza by militants, and the other 13 were likely killed by tank shelling and crossfire in kibbutz Beria. In relation to the killing of Israeli hostages in kibbutz Beria, according to the commission's investigation, 1256, approximately 40 Hamas militants and members of other armed groups broke into the house of Beria resident Pesky Cohen, killing 1 civilian hiding in the house and wounding 1 other. The attackers then brought to the house several other civilians who had been abducted from other houses in the kibbutz, and the militants gathered them in the dining room. At this point, there were 15 civilians in the house, including two 12-year-old children. According to survivors' testimonies, the militants also brought a Palestinian man from East Jerusalem who had been abducted from the Nova Festival to act as an interpreter. At approximately 1500, the militants' commander, Hassan Hamduna, asked one of the hostages, a woman who had fled the Nova Festival and sought refuge in Beirut, to call the Yamam unit of the police and negotiate a safe passage to Gaza together with the hostages. Reportedly, Hamduna stated his affiliation with the Al-Qassam brigades in the call with Yamam. Hamduna demanded safe passage for himself and the abductees to Gaza, or he would kill the hostages. I'm getting tired.
I'll pick up.
Oh,
Okay, I'll pick up
yeah.
here. Well, I know everyone is a little. We gotta keep going. At approximately 1600, the 1st Israeli Security Forces, led by the commander of the 99th Infantry Division, Brigadier General Barak Haram, arrived at the site alongside the Yemen forces. According to the testimony of surviving hostage, while 7 hostages were outside the house yard, the forces faced off against armed groups, resulting in a firefight, with hostages in the yard being trapped in the middle. Good job. After around 30 minutes, at approximately 1630, General Hamda was still on the phone with Yemen, announced that he wanted to surrender. Instructed by the police to undress, he undressed and stepped out of the house with a female hostage using as a shield. Hostage reached ISF forces. After reaching the police, he was detained, and survivor was interrogated and shared information about the 14 hostages still held in the house. And with the 40 militants still inside. According to the testimony while she was being interrogated, a survivor's testimony while she being interrogated, a firefight with a small arms fire and RPG between Israeli security forces and militants continued. Hamduna agreed to call out to the remaining militants in the house with a loudspeaker to tell them to surrender. Yet the exchange of fire continued for another hour, resulting in death of at least 2 hostages in the house yard. At approximately 1730, the militants fired an RPG at ISF forces. According to the survivors' testimony, at around 1900, General Harim gave the order to fire tank shells at the house, even at the cost of civilian casualties. He was quoted saying in a later media interview, according to the footage retrieved from police helicopter and the survivors' testimony, the tank fired 2 shells in the direction of the house. After the tank finished shooting, the survivor reported hearing Israeli security forces saying, "There's an injured hostage," and retrieved another woman from the house. The second survivor who survived the shelling told media that her husband had died as a result of the shelling while she was injured by the shrapnel. 13 people were killed in this incident, including 2 12-year-old twins, Leah and Yalana Haranzi, and their aunt Alia Haranzi. Commission note that at least some of these hostages were killed by the crossfire while they were in the garden. An investigation by Israeli News published in April 2024 refuted some of these details and claimed that a total of 3 shells were fired at the house that day. 2 initial were fired earlier in the afternoon and were intended as warning shells aimed at targets adjacent to the house. These shells did not cause significant damage to the structure of people inside. Only at around 1900, Israeli security forces led by Yemen considered a strike that would aim to end the situation. A decision was then made to shell the roof of the house. Following the shelling, Yemen forces entered, took note that some people were still alive, including militants, and saw a woman who had survived. They removed her from the house as it went up in flames. Good job again. The commission also verified information indicating that at least 1 resident of Nir Oz was killed as a result of Israeli helicopter fire as she was being abducted in the Gaza. Efrat Katz, age 68, was abducted by militants along with her daughter and 2 granddaughters, as well as other kibbutz residents. Efrat and the other abductees were placed in the cart of a tractor and driven in the directions of Gaza. According to her daughter, testimony to Israeli media, on the way to Gaza, an exchange of fire erupted between militants and Israeli security forces who were trying to stop them. As a result of the shooting, Efrat Katz was killed while her daughter was wounded in the back and one of her daughters was wounded in her leg. A released hostage from Kibbutz Nir Oz, also in the cart of the tractor, witnessed the events unfolding. He stated that at approximately 11:30, the tractor reached some 150 meters before the border. Then she heard the sound of a helicopter in the air and of shooting. She realized she had been hit by gunfire and that Efrat had been hit too. She confirmed that Efrat had died on the spot as a result of the helicopter fire. All right. Go ahead, pick up 234.
Just letting you know, I'm still, well, I'm wondering if we could cover this and maybe get the rest on a different day.
We're going to finish this, though. We're almost done.
Okay. Which number again?
234.
There we go. First responders. The commission observed a series of deficiencies in the Israeli examination of the crime scenes and the processing of bodies for identification and burial, including the absence of systematic collection of forensic evidence. The commission verified through several interviews that all bodies were brought for identification to the Shura camp near Ramallah, where two separate camps were eventually established given the large number of incoming bodies, Shura A and Shura B. In the days following the attack, criticism began mounting on the slow identification of bodies, with many family members being told that their loved ones were missing. On the 11th of October, the head of Unit 360 reportedly stated in a media article that the process in Shura included photographing the bodies, taking fingerprints, and checking for special identification marks such as tattoos or piercing. Fingerprints are then cross-checked against a database, and once there is a match, the body is released for burial. When there is no match, the DNA sample is taken from the deceased and cross-checked against DNA provided by families of missing persons. He did not mention any collection of forensic material or forensic identification processes. Similarly, testimonies by first responders working in Shura collected by the commission emphasized hold on. Okay. Emphasized a focus on the identification process and religious rights and did not mention forensic evidence collection. One first responder working in Shura camp told the commission that they spent approximately 5 to 7 minutes on each body, taking photos and checking for identification marks and taking fingerprints. Additionally, according to a report in an Israeli news publication, there was only one CT scanner in the Shura camp. CT scanners are an integral part for the investigation of the cause of death. The commission notes that religious volunteer groups, including Unit 360 and Zakah, were deployed as first responders that day, entering locations immediately after they were cleared by Israeli security forces. The commission observes that these units were not trained or equipped to manage large and complex crime scenes and may have also tainted or even tampered with evidence. According to several reports, in the first days following the attack, first responders worked in several locations under fire and were therefore told to hasten the processes of removal of bodies, resulting in no or limited images of the original state of the body taken by a qualified police photographer. In other locations, first responders took photos of their own phones, with their own phones, and in some cases covering victims for modesty. One first responder working for Zakah provided inaccurate and exaggerated accounts of findings in media interviews. Yeah, I remember that one.
Their paragraph. I'm not going to do all the individual evidence. I don't think anyone questions this in particular. The commission documented substantial evidence that the attacks on Israel on 7 October were led by the Hamas military wing, the Iz ad-Din al-Qassam brigades, together with other Palestinian armed groups. In addition to Hamas, the commission identified the military arms of 6 Palestinian armed factions: Palestinian Islamic Jihad, Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades, which is Fatah, Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine, the Popular Resistance Committees, and the Palestine Mujahideen Movement. The commission found that prior to the attack, all 7 groups were taking part in joint military maneuvers aimed at simulating expected enemy threats and increasing their efficiency and the ability of resistance fighters to fight in various circumstances, which was overseen by a Palestinian Joint Operations Room. In an interview with Al Jazeera in June 2023, Amin Nafal, the commander of the military relations and a member of the General Military Council of the Al-Qassam Brigades, stated that the Palestinian Joint Operations Room is an alliance of military arms and the Palestinian Armed Group, established in 2018 in Gaza to coordinate their activities against Israel. Nafal stated in the interview that the alliance is currently composed of the military wings of 10 Palestinian armed groups, including the 7 who participated in the 7 October attack. The Commission also confirmed this information through additional sources, including images, videos, and statements issued by the Joint Operations Room. And this next couple sections is just verifying the various groups in that were noted to have been participating, including individual Palestinian civilians, it should be noted. You know the attack aims. We've covered that fairly extensively. All right.
Should we conclude this?
I'm just going to do the headlines of what crimes have been found committed. The war crimes, a war crime of intentionally directing attacks against civilians, members of the Palestinian armed group, the war crime of murder, war crime of violence to life or person, war crimes of outrages upon personal dignity, sexual violence. I'm not going to read that out fully. Destroying or seizing property of an adversary without military need, war crime of taking hostages and inhumane treatment, violations of international humanitarian law. This particular note, they found that the tank firing at the house was bad too. And
I think this is pretty self-explanatory what this attack was, what the October 7th crimes were. It's outrageous when I hear it referred to as a genocide. Although I have mentioned many times before that it, when it did happen, it was so shocking to me because of the mass shooting of Jews, and immediately my mind goes back to sort of Einsatz's commando operations. But once the smoke clears, you actually analyze what took place, it's a lot different. Nonetheless, very horrible.
Well, what it is, ultimately, kind of like a series of maps.
It is, yeah, it is.
And I don't want to diminish what's happened. And the whole point of these 2 nights was not to diminish what's happened, but the situation is such that, and why I was so cautious about how to call things throughout this entire thing. This is already a charged, difficult situation.
This was a charged topic before October 7th. It's a very difficult one to cover. When we did, when I took my graduate course on genocide after World War II, we covered Chechnya, which it mainly due to the fact that the professor was an expert on it, but it wasn't, the legality of it as genocide or not is debatable. And actually, she would debate that it's not that. It doesn't meet the legal definition, but she actually was very hesitant to even cover Israel-Palestine because of the contentious nature of it.
This is a topic that blacklist.
Yeah.
It's especially a topic if you don't show a lot of deference to Israel. That's just the basic facts of it. And we've seen that throughout the course of the last 8 months, 9 months, happening all over. I think it's important to recognize that these things were horrible and that they happened. And I don't doubt that they happened.
I think it's important to understand why, how big of a trauma this was for Israeli society, and why it is sort of, even turned people who were previously moderate or had actually a very, progressive views towards the situation to turn them right.
Well,
And I think it's important to use it as a means of understanding it. It does not justify what has happened at all.
it's not
But
a unique thing to Israeli society.
no,
Any
it is, and
society
the
that
same thing.
experiences,
The same thing occurred after 9/11, for
yes, or
example.
it's occurring in
United States.
Ukraine even now.
Yeah,
Societies that experience that violent shock become more reactionary, or more
yeah.
vicious in attitude, and in the case of the campaign in Gaza, deep towards the people that they think they're fighting. It's not unique, but it is something that we should try to guard ourselves against. It's easy to be hateful of the Palestinians for what was done. It's easy to be hateful of the Israelis for what they're doing. And it's
I think it's important for us as outsiders to look at it with a very objective lens, and it's hard to do that. It's hard for me to do that sometimes, but as distances, as the more distance that has, you know, the more distance between, October 7th and for me, has actually sort of helped me become more objective with this. It was really hard when it did happen. I was very angry.
Yeah, I was concerned we were going to have a issue. As you know, I've never
But
been shy about calling out Israel.
no, you haven't, and quite honestly, it's calling them out is well deserved. But
I think I've always been fair-minded, but shy about doing it. And I it's hard for me not to see this as all of it being so avoidable.
for sure.
And it's a crime, but it's also it's a tragedy. Because we are the country that's best positioned to end this,
Yeah, and
and we don't.
there's no end in sight to it.
We don't,
And
because we don't apply the pressures we need.
there is an issue too in terms of how this is going to affect elections coming up. Because honestly, even though it's not necessarily in their best interest to vote for Trump over Biden, you have many, many people within the Palestinian community in the United States that hold Biden personally responsible for a lot of what has happened in the aftermath of this. And I was just watching a really interesting documentary, actually, where this person goes into the only Muslim majority town in the United States. I forget where in Michigan it is, but it's predominantly Palestinian. And he talked with an imam at the local mosque, and the imam said, "Me voting for Biden is signing that with the blood of my relatives, and that I'm not going to do that. That we will do whatever it takes to see that he's out of office. That he will pay for it." And
It's
in all
Dearborn.
fair, yeah, in all fairness, this would have happened with any U.S. president.
Yeah, I
That's
don't
how
think it's
strong the lobby is for the Israeli lobby, particularly.
well, and that's, I think, a good point to talk about, because there were people like, well, why are you paying attention to AIPAC? AIPAC, I think, has been uniquely successful in securing aid to Israel, to the point that they've received the most aid any foreign country since 1948.
And to be honest, it's not really aid that they necessarily need because they're a really successful, developed country by this time.
Well, a lot of it is
You,
military aid, right, that we pay for. It's like we give them a
yeah,
credit card to spend on American.
on American weapons, but they have their own robust defense industry.
Yeah, so like
So,
there are a lot of things to talk about there. I think there is the concept that Israel isn't really a strategic partner for the United States, and that the United States is more of a guarantor of Israel, than it is something we need. In fact,
yeah,
and make the argument, and we have with the commander, that Israel hasn't had a strategic function for us in decades.
Israel, the United States is a proxy. I'm not going to get into that.
No, it's
Actually,
not even
no.
really a
No.
proxy though, because it's not
Yeah,
like Israel is doing the bidding of the United States. In a lot of
yeah,
ways, we are almost powerless to influence Israeli policy, particularly when Likud is in power. So like it's a really strange relationship that doesn't fit into that dynamic that people so often try to paint it as, because it's very much a case of it's not the kind of dynamic you would expect. Um, it's very much a case of a country that wants to do its own thing and has at various times been enabled by the United States. For example, our inability to get resolutions of Syria and Israel, based on Resolution 232 or 242, excuse me, or the same for the Camp David Accords. Like, a lot of deference is shown to Israeli goals that we wouldn't necessarily show to other countries. And like I don't like talking about it per se, because if you talk about it and you're not clear on what you're saying, you sound kind of anti-Semitic. And I
of
get
course.
why you would sound like that, but at the same time, I have to acknowledge the historical and diplomatic reality that
Yeah, no, same thing on my end.
and I mean it's especially like it has become such a much more fraught discussion of how certain people are abusing the concept of anti-Semitism and combating anti-Semitism in order to shut down criticism of Israel, and in how the Israeli government itself behaves towards other governments, United States, the ICC, or other governing bodies, I suppose I should say, is a situation, I think, that has to be discussed, but the tools to discuss it are fraught.
I have to go.
Yeah,
I think we should call this a night because
we're gonna sign out.
me and my girlfriend want to sleep.
I want to thank
So,
everybody for coming out tonight. Invite you to subscribe and like the stream. I will be back at least by Friday. I don't know about Hetman. Have a good night, everybody.
all right, we will.